This is a black oak, and there's tons of acorns on this one. We've been going around the farm over the last few weeks just checking out the oaks. The white oaks seem to be holding pretty good on acorns. Not awesome, but maybe 25% of the trees have acorns. But these black oaks are doing really well. The reds are holding pretty good too. So this should be a good acorn year. And that means that in order to do really well during the early season, you need to find the oak trees that are dropping acorns and then just set up camp on those spots, because that's where the deer are going to be. They'll go right past a conventional food plot and head to acorns when they're dropping. Welcome to Dream Farm. I'm standing in a small plot here that we put the Whitetail Institute tall tine tubers in about maybe 2 to 2.5 weeks ago. And I've been going all through the farm, seeing how the various fields are growing, what some of the work we've done, how it's panning out, trying to figure out what's left to do before the season comes in. And we're getting pretty close to the end now. I mean, there's not a lot more updates. But today's episode is going to be mostly updates with a little bit of work. But like I said, we'll start right here. This one, it was kind of a test plot for us. It's a small interior plot. I mean, I'd say it's 1/4 of an acre. And there's enough trees around it that it's kind of a worst case scenario, you know, as far as getting sunlight in here. Also for the roots that are already underneath the soil, pulling moisture out. So if we can get something to grow here, we feel like we're doing pretty well. And the tall tine tubers from Whitetail Institute was the blend that we picked here, and it's mostly turnips. You know, it's got their blend, their special varieties that they prefer. But they're coming in pretty strong. At first I was a little bit nervous about it, but now, as you can see, it's coming in pretty good. So, you know, if we get a couple more rains, this should be fine. I'll have to hit it again with fertilizer before we're all done, but I'd count this one as a success for now, you know, assuming we get the rains. So if you look down, Jordan, you're going to see that they're mostly the round-leafed ones. Mm-hmm. That's the stuff that we planted. There's a few weeds in here that came in after I sprayed it with the glyphosate. But you've probably been wondering where Jordan's been. She's been in the background working on apparel. That's kind of her thing. She loves the shirts and hats, and the shirt that I'm wearing is one of her new ones. We've got a few others that she's made that you can check them out by going to shop.bowhuntingwhitetails.com, and that's where we've got all that stuff. So she'll keep adding new stuff, and as we get closer to the fall, we'll see more and more of her as we start getting closer to hunting. This cornfield behind me is one of the few successes on the farm this year. I guess being down in the valley, it did really well in spite of the fact that it was really dry. And there's about probably 3.5 acres here. So I expect this will be one of the key spots for the season coming up. You know, the deer are going to rally around this. There's a few other spots that are doing well too, but any place you've got the food, like we've always said, you know, you find the food, you find the deer. So this valley was one that we liked hunting anyway, so it's going to be probably one of the prime locations this season. About a week ago I planted the Whitetail Institute Pure Attraction on this plot, and I just broadcast it hoping that a rain would come and incorporate the seeds. There's brassicas in there, and there's triticale, and there's oats. Well, the turkeys figured out that the oats and the triticale were here, so they've just been picking through this and taking out all of the cereal grain. So I'm going to hit it real quick now with some cereal rye, and hopefully the turkeys won't see that. But the brassicas are going to be what has to carry this, because my fear is that the turkeys are going to continue to find any cereal grain that I throw on top of the ground. This is just an annual, but this is a really small seed compared to the winter wheat. And well, it's about the same size as the winter wheat, but it's really small compared to the oats. So hopefully the turkeys won't see it. It'll just mix into the dirt. Probably drag something behind the four-wheeler and cover up some of this stuff, but I mean, I look down there and all I'm thinking is, if I was a turkey, I'd never leave this spot, because there's, everywhere you look, it's just a carpet of grain. Dream Farm is brought to you by Whitetail Institute Food Plot Blends, Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail App, Hoyt Archery, Wildlife Farming, and PH Outdoors. I'm back at this, I guess you could call it a test plot that we did. In front of me is that probably acre to acre and a half plot that was tilled up and smoothed out. And right to my left is about a quarter acre plot that all we did was sprayed it and killed it. I can hear that baby eagle calling. We had an eagle hatch right up on the side of the hill here. There's a little baby up there now. But anyway, got distracted. The idea was to see if we just casted out the seed, if it was how it was gonna compete, or how well it would compare to the spot where we drilled it in. And really there's no comparison. The spot that we drilled in is doing a lot better, except in the spots where the dirt was too soft and the drill went in too deep. So that's kind of the risk when you run a no-till drill into really soft tilled ground, because the no-till drill is pretty heavy. So it wants to push down in, and I probably didn't have it set shallow enough on the seed depth, and so it's not doing really well in the soft part. So I've got to go in there, and I think I'll just broadcast that. We've still got plenty of open dirt. You know, we're going to get hopefully some rains here in the next couple of days, and that'll incorporate the seed that's right on the surface. But you can see here that in the outer rows where the ground was harder and firmer, the Wintergreens did really well. I mean, they got to the correct depth and they're doing really well. But as you go further into the field, then they're not doing nearly as well. I'm guessing they just got, put in too deep. And I talked to the fella at Whitetail Institute, and he said that 3/4 of an inch max. He said if you go any deeper than that, the brassicas just don't have the energy to fight their way up through that much dirt. But on this one, we don't have to worry about that. I mean, it went in as shallow as you possibly can. It was on top of the ground. So we'll show you both of them. We'll start, I guess I'll go to this one right now. There's a bunch of thistles in there, but there are some wintergreens coming up, and a few spots are coming up pretty well, but it's not nearly as good as what you see out in this field where I drilled it. I love that eagle. I wonder where he's sitting. He was born this past winter, I guess. He can fly, and he flies around and screams at me all the time, like I'm somehow intruding on his space. I hate to tell him that this is my space, and he's intruding on my space. There he goes again. All right, so the next project then is to get some more fertilizer down. And I've said that I don't like to fertilize, a heavy rate until I know that I've got some germination, because I don't want to have a bunch of fertilizer out and then have the seed that I planted not pop up. But I feel pretty good about this one that I tilled, so I'm going to go ahead and hit that pretty hard, and then we're going to go up on that little bench And I showed it to you last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, I think. And it's doing really, really well. I mean, if you want a success story, that'll be the one. And that one I'm gonna hit really hard with fertilizer. And we'll talk about how that one, why that one did so well compared to some of these other spots. He's going pretty good. But yeah, so let's get the fertilizer out, and then we'll keep moving. This is the best spot so far of anything that we've done for rescue in a food plot. This was beans, and then I drilled using that PH Outdoors G8 no-till drill. That unit did a really nice job, but I drilled the wintergreens into this. And you can see it's coming up really well. And I think that one of the reasons it did so well was we caught 2 rains, but I think more importantly, the ground was really firm. And it put the seed in at the right depth. It put the seed, just about a ½ an inch or so into the ground, and there was moisture there. So right away it started to germinate and grow. If you remember back a few episodes, we were showing how this was just starting to pop out of the ground. I'm not going to fertilize this anymore. I don't want to drive over it anymore with the 4-wheeler. So I think I'm pretty much done. I've hit this twice, so I think we should be good to go on this one. Just let this one run its course. So hopefully we get a couple more rains, and this plot will feed a lot of deer. So the spot that we're going to look at next is the place where we planted, I can't take credit for it, the acorns back in November. And we've battled this location ever since then, trying to get these little oak trees to survive, to thrive, flourish. They're still coming up, believe it or not. Here we are, today's the 8th of August. And we're still seeing little 2-inch tall, 1-inch tall trees coming out of the ground. So I would have thought everything would have, germinated and started growing in the spring, but that's not the case. They're still coming up. But we had a big infestation of thistles that hit this spot, and I sprayed it probably about a week ago, a week to 10 days. You can see that the herbicide is doing its job. This was a product called Sonora, and I don't remember the active ingredient. I could look it up. It's some long term that wouldn't be easy to remember, but the point is it kills most broadleaves and doesn't kill the trees. And I noticed looking at some of these trees that it did stunt them just a little bit. Maybe it just like curled them, but the label says that that's normal, that they bounce back real quick from that. A lot of them, it didn't even seem to have any effect on them at all. So I found one here that's pretty beat up. And again, it's the same song I've been singing for 3 months. If we get rain, I think all of this stuff bounces back and does just fine. But this one is stressed. I think he's stressed from really being buried by those thistles for maybe a couple of months. But he's starting to hopefully snap out of it. There's another one right over here to Carson's left. I'm gonna pop over to it. This one seems to be in a little bit better condition. It seemed to snap out of it a lot quicker. This one looks better, but overall, I mean, we could micromanage every single little oak tree in this plot, I guess, but overall I'd say we've done everything we can here. Nature's gonna have to run its course now, and some of these dudes are gonna have to be survivors, and some of them are gonna be quitters. If I had to grade this on a scale of 0 to 10, as far as the success of this one, I'd give it a 4 or a 5. It's done pretty well, but not great. And it's just because, the trees are spaced out a little bit wider than what I think they should be. I know the acorns were in the ground at a lot higher density than what the trees are that we're seeing. Okay, we got 2 plots left on the farm. This spot that we're at right now is where Jordan killed her buck last year. And it's a really cool location. It's right back, tucked back into some timber. There's bedding, no doubt, out in front and maybe on all sides. I know in the winter the deer were bedded all around this. I planted this to beans back in mid-May, mid to late May. And kind of like everything else on the farm, it just did not grow. So the deer were able to stay on top of the beans and keep eating them. So they just never really, took over. I sprayed this about 2 weeks ago, and there's a pretty decent kill here. So I'm gonna drill the Whitetail Institute Wintergreens into this one. I've got another plot a little bit further around this point, and I think I may do part of that to wintergreens and part of it just broadcast some cereal rye. I may end up trying to get the farmer to leave me some of this corn. The way that my thumb has been this year, anything but green. I probably should just let them plant the whole way through here and I'd have something growing, but I thought I could save a little money this year and put beans in and have it work out, but the deer just like eating beans. If they're growing slow, they're just never going to stay ahead of them. So I need to get the drill in the ground. The ground is hard here, so I shouldn't have too much trouble, with planting it too deep. Some of that worked ground, I got my seed too deep, but I won't get it too deep here. The final spot we're going to look at today is this ridgetop food plot area that it's struggling a little bit. And of course we've talked about over and over and over how challenging this year has been. The corn on this ridge seems to be doing okay. The deer started hitting it pretty good. So I'd say maybe a third to maybe 40% production on this one. The deer will have gotten the rest of it. They've eaten it while it was green, and I think it's because we're a long ways away from water. And not only do they like the taste of the corn, but there's a lot of moisture in corn because it pulls up so much out of the ground and stores it in the plant. So in some ways I think the deer are eating the corn just to get something to, from a moisture standpoint or a water standpoint. The little strip next to it that I came back and drilled the wintergreens into is doing pretty well. I've noticed something here that's fairly interesting. Wherever the spray didn't get a really good kill, I think it's trefoil is what this stuff is, that it just didn't wipe out clean. Some legumes, glyphosate just isn't very good at killing. And I don't want to put 2,4-D in when I'm spraying because that's got a residual effect, and then your turnips and brassicas that you plant after that aren't going to do well. So I had to just go with glyphosate. There's some really badly stressed areas on this food plot. I think it has to do with the roots that are coming into the field from the trees on the outside edge. I think that it's so dry anyway, and then you throw those tree roots under the ground, you know, 12 inches down, sucking out any subsoil moisture, and that's enough to put some of these some of these plants into the red alert mode. But there are areas that are doing well, so that's all I can figure, is it has to do with the trees around the outside edge. Before I finish my career here in the next few years, I'm going to have a way to cut those roots, to clean up the edge of these food plots so that you don't have that competition coming in from the outside. The only problem you got to run into there is the white oaks are pretty sensitive, and if you shock them by cutting the roots, sometimes you can kill them. So you want to keep that in mind. But everything else, like these walnuts off to my left, and some of the other ones that are competing, you could sure cut those roots and not impact the tree. Pumpkins, unfortunately, are in the same boat. We got a couple of mounds that are doing really well, but most of them are just struggling because they're in that dry zone. The sorghum is doing pretty well again overall, but
it seemed like that is that the south end of the plot?
Yes.
The south end seemed like it was doing better overall, the sorghum and the corn, just everything, than this area right here for sure. And do you think that is because the trees are farther away from the edge and you sprayed some of those little ones and stuff like that, and you're just...
That's what I think. I think it's because, as you'll see as we go around here, and we'll fly it with the drone so everybody gets a better view of it, you're going to see like arcs going into the field, and then you'll see like really good spots right next to really bad spots. And the only thing I can figure, because the soil doesn't change that quick,
right,
unless you got a rock shelf right there and the dirt is really thin, which I don't think. I've seen it before, and that's why I'm always like guardedly optimistic of those interior food plots, because they're awesome when you get enough moisture, but on dry years they don't do very well at all because the trees suck all the moisture out of the dirt. So I've had them dry right up to a crisp on dry years, those internal plots, those interior ones that you make that are half an acre in size.
right.
I got to fertilize the wintergreens that we put down, and we're doing all this with optimism. I mean, I've been fertilizing a number of fields throughout this episode, and that's hoping that for once in their lives they're, well, I won't be too down on the weathermen, but that they're actually right, because they're supposed to have a 90% chance of high rains, thunderstorms, significant thunderstorms in 2 days. Today's Wednesday 8th. We're supposed to on the 10th get a bunch of rain.
It's the 9th.
Today's the 9th?
Wednesday the 9th.
Then the 11th, Friday, we're supposed to get a bunch of rain. So if they're right, life is good. If they're wrong, we just wasted a bunch of money on urea that's just going to evaporate, which I don't know who to send the bill to, but I'll bet you.
The weatherman.
Yeah, like I'm saying, I don't think they're going to pay it. Well, that's pretty much it. You've seen this ridge. You've seen the rest of the farm. You've seen some of the projects we're doing. We've learned lessons. Every year it seems like we learn, and hopefully you're picking up some of it as we go. We're going to wrap up right there. Jordan's got to get back to work making some more t-shirts.
I have some good ideas coming down the pipeline, so
keep your eyes out for t-shirts.
Might have something for our Iowa Hawkeye fans here soon, hopefully.
In Nebraska,
no,
Minnesota?
Specifically Ethan, Nebraska fans, you're not going to like this one much.
You're not welcome.
No.
All right, well, we'll stop there before we chase away all of our audience. Well, we appreciate you joining us. We'll see you right back here again, probably in a week, for the next episode of Dream Farm. And remember to always dream
big.
Yeah.
I almost forgot.
We almost forgot.
Yeah.